So I suppose generally speaking, we try to say that if you want to study computer science, you generally would exhibit these 6 characteristics. Mainly you would like problem solving. So if you're one of these people that I suppose does a puzzle or likes to take on a quiz, and you get a real sense of satisfaction out of working your way through it until you come to the solution, that's usually a characteristic that a lot of computer scientists have. You want to make an impact. So this isn't something that people immediately think of, but if you study computer science, you can certainly work in tech companies and do important things there. But you're going to be working in every type of sector. It could be the health sector, it could be anything looking at energy and climate change, it could be food production, it could be manufacturing. So you're really making an impact in terms of real world problems. That's an important thing to be aware of. So if you actually want to do something that will make an immediate difference. Typically people are creative. That's again one people don't think of very often. If you're going to solve real world problems, you have to be creative in how you apply the technology in order to get a solution that actually works in practice. So creativity is something that really is necessary. And typically you have to enjoy teamwork. I suppose there's this perception that computer scientists tend to work on their own, in a way, in a laptop in a dark room. That's very much not the case. You nearly always have to work as part of a team, and often a team with people with many different backgrounds and perspectives. You always have to be keen to learn. I suppose if you think of some disciplines, you might be learning things that fundamentally aren't going to change. But if you think back of how technology has actually developed in the last 20 years, it has changed rapidly, and it will continue to change rapidly. So if you're a person that always wants to learn, that you always have an appetite, I suppose, for new information, this might be a career for you. And of course seeks broad opportunities, because there's a wide range of fields that you can work in. So they're typically the characteristics that we see of people that study computer science. So we're often asked, what is computer science? And I think the easiest place to start usually with this is by saying what computer science is not. You often hear this, analogy of, they're always on social media and they're always on their computer, sure, why don't they go and study computing? Computer science is not playing, video games or being on social media or having an ECDL qualification or whatever it might be. So it's not about using computers. Computer science is the study of computation, and that computation can be information, software, or systems. So there's many specializations that you can go into within the field of computer science. It can be data analytics, so analyzing large amounts of data and trying to get meaning or decisions from that. Looking at how we interact with technology as humans. I suppose our characteristics as a human, the bearing that has on the technology itself, and equally how the technology influences how we behave. The computer networks that support everything that we do. There's a tendency for people to think, yeah, the internet's there and it's already there and it doesn't have to do anything else. In fact, the networks are developing and having to become more intelligent and evolve all the time, because more and more devices and more people are reliant now on networks.
Cute, right? And
of course, computer security. So for example, everything that we do now is essentially online. And I mean, we'll have seen here, for example, even with recent breaches in the Irish health system, there's potential for critical services to be entirely crippled if the network or the computer system, the software, whichever part of it is, isn't secure. So that's the vital part. So ultimately, I suppose what you're doing is you're designing computer systems, applications, and analyzing data in order to design systems, design software, analyze data in order to make, benefit a particular sector. Now, I think it's worth mentioning, you can see a few graphics down the left-hand side, and in particular, you can see the bust of George Boole, which is in the quad in the campus. And a lot of people are familiar with the bust of Boole, but they're not necessarily, I suppose, aware of the significance. So George Boole was one of the first professors in mathematics back in, I think it was 1867. I might be slightly off with the year. And he developed a theory that you could represent mathematical variables as, I suppose, true or false, or if you think of modern day computing systems, on or off, this representation of Boolean algebra, things being a 1 or a 0. That theory has actually been the foundation for modern day computer science. So we're actually very proud of that. That he's considered to be one of the the fathers of the information age, and that actually this started here in UCC. So we have this kind of long tradition, starting with maths, because of course computer science wasn't a discipline at the time. And in fact, his work led to then Claude Shannon, who's an American scientist, about 70 years later, using that to develop the first electrical circuit, which could represent something as one or a 0, or an on or an off. And that's basically the basis for modern day computer systems. And Google actually represented that, by celebrating the 200th birthday of Boole in this Google Doodle that you can see on the left-hand side. So we're very proud of our links stretching all the way back to Boole that represent, I suppose, our basis for modern day computer science. Okay, so what are the fields that you typically expect to see computer science used in? Well, we all know about using technology for technology's sake. We all use different apps on our phone and so on. But in fact, more than 99.9% of our computer systems are embedded systems or things. So if you think what's happened in the last 10 years, there's been this explosion in social media, which we all use, and that's been about connecting people. Okay, so you can say now that, majority of the world, or at least the developed world, is in some way on social media. So as people, we're connected. But what we're now seeing is this evolution of what's called the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything is what it's sometimes called, where we're now connecting things to the internet. Okay, so some of you may have this already in your home. You might have a smart doorbell, a smart security system, a smart fridge. So we're beginning to connect devices. But this is prevalent in every aspect, whether it's in a smart manufacturing environment, whether it's an engine, whether it'll be in our cars. Everything is going to have somehow some embedded sensing, which will be connected to the network or to the internet. Of course, if we actually think of the implications of this, this means if all of these devices are going to be connected to the internet, the number of devices like we've never seen before, that's going to place a stress on the network. It's going to mean that we need more software and apps in order to process the data that's been gathered off it. And because there's such a huge amount of data being gathered, we're going to have to analyze that data. So essentially, we're going to need more and more of these of computer science graduates in all of these industries to be able to deliver on the products and services that are necessary. None of this is going to be possible without computer science graduates. And if we take just one example of that, because there's many examples, but I'm just going to take one. If we think of a smart city, okay, so I mean, every city is going to eventually evolve to be a smart city. Now, what do I mean by a smart city? It means that all the things are connected. So this could be something like, in the graphic, we can see a photo of a bin there. It could be that your bin has a sensor on it. And instead of your refuse truck going out to every bin across the city, and some of the bins are empty and some of the bins are full, and maybe they're not following a particular type of route, well, they can actually see when the bins are full. So therefore, they're not making unnecessary trips. And maybe they optimize the trips that they take so that they're only collecting the bins on a particular route that are full. Or maybe they optimize their trips through the city such that there's minimal, I suppose, traffic congestion, and they can get through the city or navigate the city as quickly as possible. Or, for example, you could say if there was carbon dioxide sensors on all of our cars. Now, of course, cars are contributing towards carbon emissions, but if they're actually gathering information about the environment, you effectively have mobile sensors traveling around your city that can gather information that could be used by city planners for pollution. Okay, so they could say this is a particular pollution hotspot. We need to put something in place in order to counteract that. For example, or you could have, for example, cameras or servers on infrastructure like traffic lights, for example. And of course, if we can communicate with infrastructure, or if cars or people can communicate with each other, maybe they can run things like collision detection algorithms for vulnerable road users. So what I mean by that is cyclists or pedestrians. If a car can actually communicate with a pedestrian, or communicate with infrastructure at a traffic light that can also communicate with the pedestrian, well, then maybe you can prevent collisions from occurring. Or, for example, as a kind of a final example, you can see just above that blue car, you can see a camera. Okay, so maybe you have cameras around the city, and maybe they're running things like image processing algorithms. So image processing algorithms are, can be used for many purposes, but it could be used, for example, to detect if a crime is occurring, maybe an assault is occurring in the street and someone has somebody else in a headlock, for example. And maybe that can be used then to notify emergency services. And of course, you could also say maybe they have somebody in a headlock, but maybe they're only joking and it's just, banter between friends. So in that case, that would be a false positive. So these systems then have to become intelligent. What's a false negative? What's a false positive? How do you make them intelligent? So these are the types of there's many more, but this is to give you a flavor of the types of things a smart city could do. But to do all of this, you have to gather huge amounts of data. You have to analyze it. You have to make intelligent decisions on that data. You have to think about how do the people actually interact with their technology. So it's what's called HCI, human computer interaction. How does the human's behavior impact on how the technology is used and vice versa? And how do we actually build the devices, so the sensors, the embedded devices, the networks, the servers, so that they can actually process and handle all of this type of behavior and technology? And how do you design the software so that it's secure? So these are the types of things that I suppose you learn as part of computer science. Okay, who hires our graduates? Essentially every sector, every company. There are some put up here. You can see, technology companies, which you'd expect, Google, YouTube, Amazon, Netflix, and so on. You'd expect all of that. But you can also see companies, for example, like Aer Lingus. You can see the revenue, so public sector bodies, for example, banks, financial institutions, fintech, financial technology is a huge area. Hospitals might be looking at bioinformatics areas, Johnson Controls, so looking at smart manufacturing, and also use of embedded devices in retail, for example. So effectively, computer science graduates are hired in every sector. Typically, all our graduates have their placements arranged well in time and their graduate programs well before they graduate. Okay, in fact, if we could produce many more graduates, they'd be taken as well. So as I said, employability, here's a recent stat, 82% employed, 10% in further study. Typically, if somebody isn't employed, it's because they choose to do so and perhaps they go traveling. Starting salaries are quite competitive. These tend to be a starting point, and of course, it's a case of kind of the sky's the limit. You can that can increase very quickly depending on your capabilities, your skills, where you travel, and your know-how essentially. A little bit about UCC. I won't dwell on this much. You can find it out online. We're based in the Western Gateway building. It's a state-of-the-art building. So we have excellent teaching labs and facilities. We also have very good facilities in terms of specialist equipment. So for example, for VR labs, AR capabilities and so on. So HCI capabilities. So that's all available in the Western Gate as well. You can see that we rank quite high in the world rankings, and computer science and UCC is also ranked third in Ireland. So our reputation goes before us. Okay, I think it's important to mention, I won't dwell on this too much, but ultimately our teaching is informed by research. So majority of our staff members are very research active. We typically belong to National Science Foundation Ireland research centres, and we would be funded either through national funding or European funding as specialists in our field. So that could be based on insight. So for example, that's the SFI Centre for Data Analytics and Applied AI or Artificial Intelligence, Connect, which looks at communication networks, Confirm for smart manufacturing, Lero for software engineering, and so on, and there's more. What this means is that ultimately we're all experts in our field and we're all active researchers in our field, and that informs our teaching. So we feed our research back into our teaching to make sure that the graduates that are coming out are effectively looking 10, 15, 20 years ahead for how the technology is evolving. Okay, ultimately we have 4 programs in UCC. I'm going to go through these quickly. We have 2 BSc programs, which are the ones you can see on the left, the BSc in Computer Science and the BSc in Data Science and Analytics. And we have 2 BA programs, which is a Bachelor of Arts, a BA in Psychology and Computing, and a BA in Digital Humanities and IT. So I'm going to take you through the 4 of those, and I suppose how you might choose between them if you know you want to do something in computer science, but you're not sure of the difference. So ultimately, we have this flow chart, and we think this at least goes some way towards helping you to make your decision. So, ultimately, we assume you're here because you have an interest in technology. And if that's the case, you have to really ask yourself, do you like, or would you like to understand the technology itself? So if you were to look under the hood, do you really want to do a deep dive on how this technology works? So do you like puzzles? Are you very logical and methodical in how you approach things? And if you are, then the BSc programs would be possibly the best option for you. And between them, if you ask yourself, do you really like mathematics? So if you feel you're very strong in maths, you'd like to look at how statistics and computing goes together, then the BSc in Data Science and Analytics might be the one for you. So effectively taking large amounts of data, applying algorithms and statistical methods and mathematical approaches to make sense of that data. If you're leaning more towards, say, the engineering or the scientific principles of computer science, so things like networking, developing software, elements of AI and machine learning as well, but also cybersecurity and understanding how the whole system or software works, then the BSc in computer science might be for you. Okay. On the right-hand side, if you're interested in technology, but you're interested in learning how it works, perhaps not as much detail as the BScs, but still learning how it works and applying it, while I suppose very much dealing with the human components or the human aspects of it, then the programs on the right might be for you. So if you're interested in how people, I suppose, use devices and how you can develop technology so that it's best designed for humans, whether it's a human with a disability or a particular way of viewing something or how they might best interact with it, then the BA in Psychology and Computing is for you. This is in fact something that's going to become increasingly more important when we're dealing with increased automation. So, what we're going to see now over the years is an increased amount of robotics. This isn't something that you're just seeing from movies anymore. We're going to see a rise of automated devices, whether it's cars or robots. So how we interact with these and how we best design them so that they can complement our lives rather than hinder it or make it difficult. And then the second one, which is the BA in Digital Humanities and Information Technology, is looking at if you have an interest in humanities, so whether it's language, English, history, whatever it is, and applying computing so that it can have cultural and societal benefits, that would be a program for you. Okay, there's certain things that are common to all of them. They all have a paid work placement with industry. They all have excellent employability. It's an internationally accepted qualification, so there's no such thing as having to retrain because you go to a different country. It's recognized internationally, so you can travel. They all have hands-on components. And I think it's important to point out there's no prior computing experience required. Okay, some people entering our program have it. They might have some experience, some don't. You'll find that it's not a disadvantage if you work hard and concentrate. We teach you everything you need to know. Okay, so just a few extra details. The BSc in Computer Science is our longest running program, CK401. This is the program for which I'm the program director. You look at things like networking, designing software, security, things like AI and machine learning, data algorithms. And ultimately what you're trying to understand is how computers and computing systems work, how to build complex pieces of software that are secure, core computing topics like networking, databases, web, cybersecurity, all the things that you'd expect. And then you look at advanced topics like AI, mobile apps, gaming, and so on. Data science and analytics is essentially focusing on how to analyze the huge amounts of data that are now going to be gathered from devices. So you're looking at how to make data-driven, typically machine learning-based decision-making, how to make predictions or forecasts based on data, and how do you analyze it? Okay, so it's not much good if you have tables of data. As humans, we don't really understand those. How do you visualize this? How do you get meaning, or something that actually, that somebody doesn't say, so what, that you actually have meaningful decisions that you can make from your data by visualizing things. The BA in psychology and computing is essentially understanding how people interact with the technology. Okay, so does it make their lives easier? Is there ways that it could be designed so that they can better interact with it, or it can make their lives or their environment better for them? In what way can technology support the individual, and how can we best design it so that it's most intuitive? So part of this would be looking at UX, or universal design, media design, video game design, looking at things like AR, VR. So, essentially looking at ways that it can improve how we work and how we interact with it. And also looking at how the technology actually impacts how we as humans as well interact with the environment. Okay, so how do computer interfaces and behavior affect the users? How do we better design them? And how do we interact with the technology using sensors, gestures, and so on? This is an area that's highly in demand by industry. And then we have the BA in digital humanities and information technology. So effectively, if you have a particular interest in any part of the humanities, this is a joint degree with the humanities. This is using technology to bring those interests to the fore. Okay, so whether it's curating or delivering on certain digital content, or developing a certain set of digital skills, or figuring out how humans should now interact with our environment, or interact with our culture. These are the types of things that this looks at. Not so much developing the technology itself, but looking at how you can take existing technologies and apply them to the humanities in order to enhance a particular field. So you're combining computers, culture, and society. Okay, so that's the 4 programs. You can see the codes there. I suppose they're particularly important for the CAO. I'll leave it there. There are slides with a bit more detail that I can go into if necessary, but I think I'll leave it there, and we can look at questions afterwards. Thanks, everyone.